Hello, everyone, and happy 2018. I don't think that I've spoken to you since the new year, so happy 2018. Kind of corny. I'm sitting here with one of my best friends in all of the world. This is Veronica Shanklin. I'm going to let her introduce herself in just a few minutes, but what I wanted to do first is just remind you to go buy the book. It's Acing Motherhood, Failing Marriage, 15 and a half Reasons Why I'm Naturally a Better Mom Than Wife. And I also want to let you know that it is not too late to sign up for the class that I'm teaching at Concord. It begins this Thursday, January the 11th. So see you there. And without further ado, I want to just pass the mic to Veronica and let her introduce herself to you, and then we'll kind of dive in from there.
Okay. My name is Veronica. I'm born and raised in Dallas, Texas. I graduated from the University of Texas at Austin with a degree in marketing and moved to Chicago, where I lived for about 10 years. Went to grad school there, worked in marketing. I was director of marketing at a community college. About 4 years ago, I moved back to Dallas, to DeSoto actually, to take care of my mother and my grandmother, who both had Alzheimer's.
Okay, so thank you for that brief introduction, but what I wanted to do now was kind of diving a little bit deeper, and if you can give us a little bit of, I guess the word is summary, of your 4-year journey on what kind of was a catalyst for you moving back to Dallas, and just what your journey has been since moving back.
Okay, 4 years, it's a long time, and I'm going to try to bring it in. So I was, my grandmother had moved in with my mom because she had fallen a couple times, and it was just clear she didn't need to live by herself. So my mom moved my grandmother in with her. And over the course of time, I could kind of tell that my mom was struggling with taking care of my grandmother, partly because she was still working full time and working a lot of hours. But in hindsight, probably because she was having her own issues as well. So as I would come home over time, I noticed different things. They were both losing weight. My mom seemed to not necessarily be doing the best job of keeping up with the bills and household affairs. And I kind of realized that I might need to make a move back home. So I actually ended up leaving my job in the fall of 2013. And I was back and forth over time, extended periods of time. I still had my apartment in Chicago. And earlier that winter, January, February, my mom ends up calling me. She is following an ambulance to the hospital with my grandmother in it. And long story short, my grandmother had gotten combative with her and was confused and ended up having a seizure, basically worked herself up into a seizure. And they had to call an ambulance, go to the doctor, and it just, from there, it just kind of became apparent that I needed to come back home.
Got it. So you get back home, and so you let your apartment go in Chicago, the job you had already quit, and so you move back in with your parents, and I'm sorry, at this point, your grandmother and your mom. So when you get there, what are some specific things that you're seeing in your grandmother, and what was her progression, and then just some general overview of where your mom was, because you said varying stages of the disease?
So when I moved back, my mother did not have a diagnosis. At some point over the spring, we figured out what my grandmother's issue was, and so she did have a diagnosis. But so they were in different stages. So my mom is in much earlier stages and is still working and still, very high functioning. My grandmother, when I moved back, she was still driving, and there was a point where someone called us from her cell phone to tell us, they were like, "Hey, I have your mom here. She's lost."
So a stranger
Yes.
is on your grandmother's cell phone?
Yes.
Wow.
Telling us that she's lost and they're going to let her follow them back to the freeway. And then she said she should be okay getting home from there. And it got to the point that, I put my mom's cell phone number on a sticky note on the steering wheel in my grandmother's car. So things like that with her. And as she progressed, she got somewhat combative, not like some cases that I know are, even much worse, but just the confusion, really. And she also had hallucinations, which is something that, a lot of people go through depending on what type of dementia you have.
So how about the last 6 months of caring for your grandmother?
So my grandmother passed in September.
September of 2017.
Right.
Okay.
And the last 6 months, or 2017, probably January through September, were probably the hardest part of this entire experience. She was on hospice,
Okay.
which I'm a very big advocate of hospice. She was actually on hospice for 2.5 years. They were a great resource and great support system. But long story short, with Alzheimer's, with dementia, your brain starts to shut down. So you basically forget how to do everything. So even first, it's walking. So now, you're in a wheelchair. So we're having to lift you, to put you in the wheelchair, to do all the things. You're still talking, still aware, all the way down to eating, and then to the point of now I'm just giving you smoothies because you'll, still drink something, but you're not chewing anything. And then at some point you're not moving like you were, so you're staying still for extended periods of time, so you might start getting pressure sores. And pressure sores, something I did not know anything about. I am now very well versed in all levels of pressure sores, but I mentioned pressure sores because that was probably one of the most traumatic parts of this.
Really?
Is watching her body deteriorate
Wow.
over time. And it's also makes your caregiving experience that much more intense, because it got to a point where I couldn't be gone from the house for more than 3 hours or so because I need to come turn her in the bed, or I need to come, check on her or whatever.
So you moved down initially in 2013 and your grandmother was still driving. So she was at that level, definitely with some memory things, some safety issues. And over the course of 4 years, it declined to the level of her needing total care.
Absolutely.
And you were the primary caregiver providing that care.
Yes, and I do want to give credit to my mother because she was there, but because she's having her own issues, she's not making any decisions. Like every healthcare decision, business decision, and it came to the point where now I'm managing 3 people's business affairs. I'm paying all 3 of our bills. I'm handling my mom's doctor's appointments, my grandmother's doctor's appointments, my mom's meds, my grandmother's meds, my stuff, and
that sounds really, and the word that's coming to my mind is overwhelming.
Oh yeah.
Was there a point that you just sat down on the bed and just I am in deep? Did that moment hit you early on, or?
That's a good question. I know a moment that it hit me was after it was over. And
after your grandmother passed?
After my grandmother passed. After that portion or that phase was over, because I'm still currently taking care of my mom.
Right.
But when my grandmother passed, looking back on what I had been through, ooh, wow. Where did I find the strength to do that?
Where did you find the strength to do that?
I would say my faith. From
Faith
the beginning,
in
faith in God. From the beginning of even leaving my job and moving down here, it was faith that made me do it, knowing that I would be okay. Had no idea what I was getting into. Came down here to be the assistant caregiver for my grandmother and ended up being the primary caregiver for 2 people.
For 2 people.
Right, with Alzheimer's. So I had no idea what I was getting into, and I knew nothing about Alzheimer's. So just from day to day, my faith, and even to this day, sustains me because I left my career.
Right.
So now I'm basically going to have to start from scratch to build back up to where I was or beyond.
I heard someone say that God gives you the grace for what you need when you need it. So did you find that to be your experience?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, and it's a roller coaster. The caregiving experience is a roller coaster. There are very low lows. There are highs, but there are a lot of lows. And so
when a lot of people think caregivers, they think a 70-year-old taking care of their wife or spouse or husband, but you are 30-something. So how do you manage having a social life? How do you manage career, or in the middle of caring for 2 people? What was your balance of that?
So I had a pretty active social life before, and that's somewhat important to me. So I'm willing.
I know her. That's very important to her. She likes to have fun.
And that could be, travel, hanging out with friends,
Exactly.
going out, whatever. And I know that for me, if I don't have that, especially travel, then I'm going to be even worse off.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm willing to, and I was willing to do whatever I needed to do as far as making arrangements for them, finding a sitter, going out, coming back, going back out. You know what I mean? Like whatever I needed to do to make that happen. And then something else that was helpful, especially in the beginning and just kind of learning, was support groups. So I attended a support group, a local support group. It was sponsored by the Alzheimer Association, and just being around other people who are going through the same thing or similar things is helpful. I found a neurologist from them. They told me about different testing that I needed to do for my mom, and just being around other people. So the support group that I was in was, like you said, mostly older women taking care of their spouses. Mm-hmm. I was the youngest person there, and there was another young lady in the support group. And eventually I kind of got to the point of these people, we have similar problems but not the same problems.
Not the same experience.
Yeah, they're talking about Social Security, and I thought I was gonna travel the country in the RV with my husband, and now I can't do that. And I'm sitting there like, will I ever have a husband? So, and that inspired me. So like I'm starting a younger caregiver support group, like locally here in Dallas, because I run into so many people my age who just don't have a support system and who don't want to go to the older people's support group because we have different conversations, and I'm going to do it in like a happy hour environment.
So you're creating what you need based off of lack of what you found from what you needed. So is there like anything that you want to steer anyone to as far as looking up that support group to find out information for it?
Well, I have a blog, VeeMyselfAndI.com, VEE, myselfandI.com, and so I'm doing it under the blog. And it's on Facebook.
Gotcha.
And so I'll make events on there, but it's going to be the third Monday of every month.
And it's going to be primarily for, when you say young caregivers, like what's that age range? And
you know what? There is not necessarily an age cutoff. It's more of a young at heart thing.
A young at heart.
Right. So if you enjoy happy hours and you enjoy coming out, and then because we're all caregivers, we have that in common. So you need to come vent. You need to come share some crazy thing that happened this week. You know what I mean? Or this month or whatever. We're there for you.
Right.
And I've actually participated in a younger group before, but it was online. And so it's like 4 or 5 of us that do Google Chat once a month and get together. And some of them, they're around my age, so some of them have kids, have little ones that they're dealing with, their little ones, and the parents. And it's just nice to talk to people in your age group.
Exactly. So when I hear you say caregiver, I know that you are specifically referring to you taking care of aging parents. But I also am thinking in my mind, mothers who are taking care of younger children or just whatever the dynamic. What advice would you give to people who are feeling overwhelmed by their current situation of caregiving to make them a little bit more able to handle this season?
I would say, so one big thing that comes with caregiving is caregiver guilt. And I have experienced that a lot. And it comes from when you finally do something for yourself, you feel some kind of way about either not including them, or I should be there helping them, or I should be doing this. And you kind of have to get over that. Like at some point you have to get over that, and you have to find some way to take care of yourself.
Right.
Basically. And that could be anything from just going to the movie, by yourself. You have to find, and I realize, like I said, I'm a caregiver. You cannot leave your loved one at home alone, or, what have you, but there's resources, there's care.com, maybe there's a church member you can reach out to, or someone just to come sit so that you can get away and have some time to yourself. That me time is very important.
Okay. One thing that I, in hindsight, look at as I watched you very closely care for your grandmother, at what point, at one point, it was, wow, Veronica has made this big life change to take care of her grandmother. How can I help? How can I help? But then at some point, it was just your existence. This is just your life. And so for me, as one of your friends, I didn't always think of, oh, how can I help? Because it just became what you did. And because the journey with Alzheimer's is so long, sometimes people can forget that you're in this situation. So to friends and family of a caregiver who is on this long journey, what is the best way that we can help?
I think I heard Tanika, when you interviewed Tanika, talk about this, is we can't always think of what it is. You know what I mean? Granted, ask, by all means ask. But she was saying, bring over a meal. I had 2 cousins one time, like, we're going to bring y'all lunch. They brought lunch, they brought plates, they brought silverware, they brought juice, cups, a bag of ice, like everything for this lunch. And it was like tuna fish, crackers, grapes. You know what I mean? Like, it was something real basic. But I was so touched and like moved to tears because somebody did that for us. So meals, laundry, come sit so that I can leave and go somewhere. You know what I mean? Like, time is very valuable because we have very little time to ourselves. So if you can offer some of your time to us, that's very helpful.
Good advice. Very good. Just time. I like that. Not really having to have like this huge plan, but just making yourself available.
Yep.
So now as you look to, you said, like, kind of reclaiming a little bit of your career goals and things like that, how are you thinking to navigate that with your mom, still being a primary caregiver for your mom?
That is a good question, and that is something I'm trying to figure out now. I know that if I'm going to go back to work full time, I'm going to have to find somebody that I trust to be with her.
So how do you do that?
Again, like I mentioned, care.com. And
now, is that really like a good way to, because like I'm like,
I know.
Is that like Match.com?
Hey, people get married on Match.com.
They do.
Don't knock. It's just one resource that I'm throwing out.
Right. Have you used it before?
I haven't, but I know people who have.
And you know people that have used care.com for caregiving support for their elderly parents? Yes. And they've vetted that through, and it's a good resource.
Yes. As with anything, you have to find someone that works for you.
Right.
You know, you go through a couple people, and it's also word of mouth. You know, putting it out there that you're looking for someone. And then, of course, there are home health agencies, like legit home health agencies that you can go through. They can be kind of pricey, kind of expensive. Yeah. But yeah.
It's an option.
Yeah, definitely it's an option. But yeah, you have to get help is really. And my thing is, I've been doing this for 4 years, and I did it with my mom and my grandmother for 4 years, and I just know that I can't do the next 4 years like I did the last 4 years. So I'm going to have to figure out how to balance my career, my own life with caring for my mom. And if that means that I'm going to have to ask for more help than I did in these last 4 years, then I'm just going to have to humble myself and do it.
Gotcha. As an occupational therapist, primarily working with geriatric and elderly patients, I have seen that even if it's a sibling group of 10, there's normally one that just is not even appointed or just, I don't know, they just rise up and takes the lead, and they are the one point person for everything, and they're the one that's there, and they're the primary one for everything. How was it that you became that person, and once becoming that person, was there any fatigue, resentment, anything that you kind of felt because of that?
So I see the same thing all the time talking to caregivers. It always comes down to that one, even if it's a slew of people that it could be. And how did I become that one? Because I'm single with no kids, and it's just assumed that the single person with no kids will be the person to take this on. And because I have a heart and spirit to do it. I mean, that's also why that one usually becomes it, because they're willing to, you know, to be that person. I think that one way to possibly try to have some sort of balance and try to not have it on that just one person is to talk about roles before a crisis comes up. So talk to your siblings now about, okay, mom and dad are aging. You know, we don't know what the future holds. So should, you know, they need extra care? Is anybody able to take them in? Are we going to put them in a home? You know, what kind of responsibilities do we want to talk about? And at least start the conversation. I mean, even more specifically, once the crisis comes up, okay, you're going to be responsible for meals. You're going to be responsible for, you know, finances or doctor's appointments or, you know, whoever. But have these conversations. And I get that people might not do what they say they're going to do, but at least have the conversation.
Exactly.
You know, so that, I mean, you know, 2 years from now, it's like, we talked about this. This is what we said we were going to do. So, I mean, it might avoid some confrontation and some issues. And it's not fair that one person is, you know, this is put on one person. Clearly, you know, it's not fair. But one of the ways that I think maybe you might be able to avoid that and have some help is to have a conversation about it.
Right. So, kind of along those same lines, like, I look at you and your experience, and I'm automatically thinking, this could be me soon. Like, both of my parents are aging, and so in speaking with people of our same age group, similar circumstances, what would you say are some things that we can do to prepare for if this occurs with my parents?
Right. A few things. Number one is legal and financial affairs in order. A will. A lot of people don't have wills. Life insurance, if that's, you know, one thing. But if these things are in place, find them. Know where they are. Know bank accounts, passwords in this day and age. You know, is all of this listed somewhere? If something happens to you, can we find it so that everyone is not scrambling trying to figure out what's going on? And even down to like assets, debts, income, all of this stuff. Let's get a big picture so that we know where we are. And that's important. Power of attorney, like I said, wills, trust. Get things in place now because it's much harder to do when you're in a crisis situation.
Right.
So legal, financial affairs, build your team, talk to your siblings or whoever's going to be involved in care. Talk to your loved one who will be the care recipient.
Right.
Right now, while they can still communicate what they would want, you might not be able to give them everything they would want, but there might be certain things that are really important to them that you can go ahead and talk about now. And it's not an easy conversation.
Right.
And it's an ongoing conversation. So you're not necessarily going to sit down and get it all out, you know, in, you know, one conversation.
One sitting.
Right. But just over time, kind of, you know, get these things out. And then if you are dealing with a specific illness or a specific ailment, get educated. Learn, especially with something like Alzheimer's, because there's, you know, communication strategies, there's behaviors, you know, that you're going to have to deal with. And so I took a all-day class offered by the Alzheimer's Association about, like, basically Alzheimer's 101, like when I first started this. And it was so helpful in even getting started and giving me the basics of the disease. And let's see, talk to your doctors, talk to their doctors, get to know their doctors, get to know their medical team. I have been through a couple neurologists with my mom, and not because we're difficult or anything like that, but I just wanted, you know, a medical professional who I felt like had our best interest in mind and was concerned about, you know, what was going on. But those are pretty much to prepare and to get ready before you are like drowning and swimming in it. Those are the things I would say.
Well, cool. So as you move into 2018, what would be like your vision or even a word that you have for 2018? And what are some things you're looking forward to in the upcoming year?
I would think probably my word is me. And it sounds selfish, but when you've been taking care of other people for so long and not focused on yourself at all, I gotta get back to me and, you know, doing things that are helpful to me because I have a life to live, you know, moving forward. So just building upon that, you know, career-wise and just mentally trying to get back to a space, you know, where I'm happy and I'm comfortable and you know, living my best life.
All right. So, and what are you looking forward to in 2018?
I'm looking forward to getting back to traveling.
To
'Cause
traveling.
I really, January through September, I did not really travel at all, and I like to travel. So, just seeing different places and more adventures and things like that. And I mean, even so, like in the early days, I was taking my mom. Like I would try to take. We went to Vegas. We went to Miami. Try to take her on a trip here and there. So hopefully I can, find somewhere, go somewhere with her, and just kind of getting back to myself.
Great. So one last question. Speaking to all caregivers, what would be one very practical piece of advice? And then what would be more of one encouragement that you would want to leave them with?
I think they kind of go together.
Okay.
I mean, and it goes back to something that I said before, and this is going to sound cliche, but put your oxygen mask on before you start trying to put everyone else's on. And take care of yourself, because, on those days that you can't get out of bed, you still have to get out of bed and make sure that your loved one is fed and taken care of. Because I used to laugh because I would get up, go downstairs, get my grandmother up, brush her teeth, get her dressed, get her to the table, get her breakfast, and I'm still walking around with funky breath in my pajamas looking crazy, but she's like ready to go. She's not going anywhere, but she's ready to go. And I'm like, maybe you should get up a little earlier and get your day started.
Own self together.
Right. And then go. But I would do that all the time and be like, you look a hot mess.
Right.
But her hair is combed and she got on lipstick and is sitting at the table. You know what I mean? So definitely got to take care of yourself and put on your oxygen mask and before you put on anybody else's.
Right. I think that is a great way to leave it. So thank you, Veronica, for encouraging us, and just thank you for taking care of your grandmother and your mother with excellence. And to all the other caregivers out there, take care of yourself first so that your caregiving can be an overflow and abundance of what you have to offer. So, all right. Thanks for tuning in, and I'm so excited to share Veronica with you. And there will be more to come on these wonderful, wonderful interviews. So have a great day.